Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining this episode of Intentwise webinars. We're going to be talking about AMC. Let me just quickly share my slide and just align or at least give you a sense for today's agenda. Today's content very much will be a bit in the weeds. It's not going to be a high-level presentation. I think it's going to be us, Jack and I, sharing, kind of day-to-day things we run into as run queries against AMC and deal with the data that comes out. So we'll talk about how to get started, the different event types that are available for you to exploit, data discrepancies, data gaps, a note on audience creation. And then in terms of format, we will save some time at the end for Q&A. We will also be sharing out the recording after. And then along the way, if you have questions, just feel free to use the Q&A widget on your Zoom client and start typing in questions. We'll take them at the end. And for those questions that we don't have answers for, we'll be happy to follow up as well. So that's logistics. And then just, in terms of AMC, certainly at Intentwise, we are putting out a ton of content in different formats. And like I said, this is a first in a series of webinars. So just keep an eye out. Michael, who's on my team, will be helping out in the webinar. He'll be posting a bunch of links in the chat window, just as means for you to follow us in the formats you like, whether it's podcasts, blogs, webinars, so on and so forth. And I think that should also include Jack's LinkedIn follow link as well. He puts out great content on a fairly regular basis around AMC. With that said, let me just get some intros out of the way. So I am Sreenath Reddy, the host here for today. And I'm one of the founders here at Intentwise. A quick note on Intentwise: we are an analytics platform with kind of three very specific solutions we offer, right? One is what we call Intentwise Analytics Cloud. That is a solution that automates all your Amazon data needs, and think of it as an out-of-the-box data stack to kind of accelerate your data strategy with Amazon and e-com data. That's one. We also have a solution built around AMC. It's a really robust data pipeline for all your AMC data. And also we are soon launching an ability to create custom audiences and push those to your DSP. And the third piece is we do have a retail media optimization platform as well, with a reasonable scale to support Amazon, Walmart, Instacart, and a number of other retailers. So that's a little bit about us. Excited to be here. Excited to be, part of this ride that is relatively new. We are all learning together. And in that context, I've known Jack for a bit, and if you don't already follow him, you should. I'll allow Jack to do his intro here, but he let me in on a secret a couple of days ago. He is a trained opera singer. So I was just joking that in case there's a technical glitch, the way we'll, hold the audience here is Jack will be singing. I'm just kidding. But Jack, over to you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me, Sreenath and Intentwise team. I'm Jack. I'm Director of Media Insights and Analytics at the Mars Agency. For those of you not familiar with the Mars Agency, we are a connected commerce agency that leads brands and retailers to drive growth through shoppers. Our goal is to connect people, technology, and intelligence to simplify complex commerce ecosystems. I'm really excited to join Sri today to chat about Amazon Marketing Cloud and some of the tips, tricks, pitfalls we've encountered as we've gone through this ecosystem. I think for better or for worse, there are very few folks who have spent as much time banging their heads against the wall with Amazon Marketing Cloud as we have. And I've definitely, through that process, developed a really immense amount of respect for Sri and the Intentwise team. So excited to be chatting about Amazon Marketing Cloud with you all today.
Well, thank you, Jack. Again, just want to remind you, if there's questions along the way, use the Q&A box. I will also say that we're all, it's a relatively new topic. So in the event that somebody in the participants has a better answer than what we are giving, please feel free to drop it in the chat. We'll take it. With that, let me share my screen. So there's a sequence of slides. We'll go back and forth between me and Jack. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes here just to level set on AMC. I think based on that poll, most of you know what AMC is, but just in case, to put this in context, here's a view of, let's say, what a shopper journey could have been, which is, as a shopper on Amazon, I could see a DSP ad impression somewhere. I could then see a sponsored ad click somewhere, and then sponsored display click, and then go and purchase. What happens without AMC is the data is largely last click attributed. The purchase gets credited to that last click, which is sponsored display. But with AMC, what AMC stores is every one of these events is stored with its timestamp, and you also have what's called user ID as a field, meaning that every shopper's interaction is stored at the most granular level. Now, it is a clean room, meaning that you can't go access specific user IDs. In fact, you can't query on user ID, but it allows you to mix and match, aggregate on that dimension. But in essence, and so this opens this up to just tons of possibilities, right? So in essence, it's a clean room with event and shopper level data. There is both a console access where you will have to write SQL, or there's an API access as well. But even with API, you're really passing an SQL statement for execution. And then anyone who has DSP spent today can get access to AMC. And then just one last slide on AMC, which is really what makes it unique, like I was saying earlier, is that, in each of the tables, there's a field called user ID, which you can join. So you can join like traffic data on sponsored ads, where you may get impressions and clicks, to conversion tables, to impressions on DSP. So you can connect it all. You can see impact of top of the funnel and the bottom of the funnel. You just can tons of use cases now become possible because of AMC. So that's why I think it's an exciting development. And with that, let me just dive into today's specific content. So getting started in AMC, a common question we get is, hey, how far back does my data go in AMC? Really, it starts from 7 days prior to creation date. If you have access to your AMC instance, you can check out the creation date in the console. An important takeaway from this also is that if you don't already have an instance, and I think some of you don't, we strongly urge you to go get one. As long as you have DSP spent, you can get an AMC instance. I think the one thing Amazon is just watching out for is you have the technical resources, whether it's through an agency or a partner like us or an internal team, you have the technical capability to actually go do something with it. If you need any help in getting an instance created, just reach out to us. We can certainly help in that regard. There's really two things that are required: the entity ID for your sponsored ads account, and then the DSP CFID. So those are two data points or inputs we'll need. But yeah, so that's just basics, and to address the question of, hey, how far back does my data go? The next topic, which is an interesting one, is just events and subtypes. This is where, like, Jack, if you want to take over here and talk us through this.
I think there are lots of interesting things in AMC to consider as modes of analysis beyond looking at just purchase data. I think that's the most common use case people are sort of scratching the surface with now, is how do I get a sense of customer journey towards a sale? But AMC has a set of data that's called event type and event subtype, which help you understand other unique user behaviors that folks engage in on the Amazon platform that can be really helpful or indicative of user behavior at large and help you drive differentiated and more advanced strategies. Some of those examples are things like going to your detail page, adding a product to a cart, adding a product to a baby registry or a wedding registry or a wish list, all sorts of actions that can be really helpful, but generally are hidden in all other sorts of Amazon reporting. What you can do, some of these use cases, are things like building a really concrete vision of your marketing funnel. So understanding how many users did I serve an ad to? And then of that cohort, how many clicked, how many added to their cart, and then how many purchased. So you can find where those drop-off points are across your journey through the funnel and help optimize, hey, my add to cart rate is really poor, but I'm getting a lot of clicks. What can I do about that? The second thing that you might want to consider when activating via AMC is using these event subtypes for AMC audiences. Sri is going to talk a little bit later about AMC audiences in a little bit more depth. But the broad strokes idea is you can write a query that says, select user IDs where, and then you can filter by any sort of action that that user has taken on the platform. To give you an idea of how these event subtypes might work, you could do something like, show me everyone over the last week who's added my product to their cart, but didn't check out. So we can find those people that have something sitting in their shopping cart and get them to finish their purchase journey. In total, I think thinking about the event types sort of expands the realm of possibility and should be something you're thinking about as you're going through your AMC exploration.
Perfect. The conversation about data discrepancies and data gaps comes up a lot. I think, admittedly, from AMC support team themselves, one of the things they've mentioned is like a 5 to 10% gap in metrics when you're comparing to ad console is, to be expected. That's definitely something that we have heard back from the team. Also, when you're validating or comparing data, I think a couple of things, like tactical things to watch out for is that you just want to ensure that you're passing the accurate time zone as part of the queries. So that's something that we have seen as a gotcha, The other thing that we have seen happen is when you're, let's say, trying to get spend and revenue metrics, they sit in two different sets of tables, right? So there is traffic tables and there's conversion tables. The way you join that data, you just don't want to join it in a way that, you only have conversion records showing up and not the traffic records. And that's where you can run into some issues. So just be mindful of how you join those two tables so that some of the data records you're really needing to keep don't drop off. The other guidance we have had, and we definitely see this, is there's a 24 to 48 hour, data gap, just looking back, as in like, if you're standing today and trying to query for tomorrow or yesterday or day before, there could be some data gaps. So if you're running queries that are looking back, let's say 30 days or, whatever the look back window is, just be mindful of the gap is the last 2 to 3 days, there could be some data gaps. This is an interesting one, as you run queries against the data sets where you're looking at campaigns and orders. Certainly, as we work with agencies, we have seen on point number 1, we have seen that like a single instance of AMC could have a DSP instance and multiple sponsored ads instances all in one AMC instance. And there's a desire to look at data by brand, and there could be multiple brands. And frankly, there could be multiple brands even when you run one, have one DSP and one sponsored ads accounts. So a clean mapping of campaign order to brand, or let's call it sub-brand, is super essential. The question is, how do you go about doing it? Of course, the most common way that folks have handled this is to have very consistent naming conventions that reflects, let's say, the brand in some way in the campaign name. But that also has issues. So I think, at the moment, what happens is, yes, you can maintain some sort of a lookup table that connects campaign names or order names to brands. You could do that. If you are a little bit more sophisticated, you can have a, hey, campaign name contains logic that dynamically assigns every campaign to a brand. That is something the Intentwise platform we are natively built in. Amazon has the advertiser data upload section where through API you can upload some tables which you can then use to join. But that still comes with an overhead of maintaining the mapping, because you could introduce new campaigns tomorrow. Then what happens, right? So it is a known issue. There are ways to deal with it. I mean, the most common one we've seen so far is just good, clean naming conventions that make brand assignment easy. The other quirk we have run into is AMC, when it comes to sponsored ads, data doesn't have campaign ID. Basically, what this results in is like I could have the same campaign. If you rename it, it could show up as a separate record when you're pulling data at a campaign level. Minor, but yes, it's a quirk to be aware of. Again, the way to address this is to have a lookup table that has campaign IDs and campaign names somewhere that you could join with. Again, you could use the advertiser uploads if you have API access, or if you're just doing this in Excel, you could manage it that way. In our case, what happens is that if you have an AMC instance, but you also have a sponsored ads account connected, then we're able to solve this problem by bringing in campaign ID automatically. But if you just had AMC instance from a given client and we did not have a connection to sponsored ads, this still remains a problem. Just be mindful of it on any outputs that you are producing at a campaign level.
I wanted to talk also about one of the other common pitfalls you'll encounter when dealing with Amazon Marketing Cloud. Across almost all tables, or all of them, in fact, user ID is a field that's available. However, there are lots of times when user ID is null. For those of you who aren't SQL experts, null just means it's blank. There's no value there. What that means in practice is AMC's objective, or one of its main value propositions, is the ability to track an individual user across their entire Amazon ads journey. What a null user ID indicates is that Amazon can't figure out who this user is. We know we've shown them an ad, but we don't know who we showed that ad to. And that happens most commonly when you're using targeting features, especially on Amazon DSP or on search, where that user either A, isn't in an audience or isn't signed into their Amazon account. So things that would be like non-audience targeting would be stuff like geo-targeting or contextual targeting, or using a private marketplace buy. So if you decided you were going to use Amazon DSP to buy ads on Paramount Plus, it's unlikely you'll get a clean read on all of the different user IDs that you're showing ads to. The same will be true on search ads. If I'm not logged into my Amazon account and I navigate through the site, Amazon isn't able to resolve my identity and figure out who I am and assign me that unique user ID value. What does this mean in practice? It's very important when thinking about writing AMC queries broadly to ensure that you're addressing for the use case where you don't have a user ID. So typically that's like filtering in your queries to say where user ID is or is not null, so that you have values where that's true. When you join tables at the user ID level and don't account for this user ID being null, you'll get, for example, a large number of impressions that have no user ID, and therefore you'll get values like conversion rate or click-through rate that seem wrong because the number of unique users doesn't match the actual number of impressions. So you get some discrepancies in those values. In the long run, Amazon has realized that this tracking issue and identity resolution issue of not having user IDs for all ads is going to require them to basically generate synthetic conversions to say, I know that I served X number of people impressions, or I know I served X number of impressions where I didn't have a user ID. Can I estimate how many people that is? And just give a user ID count, but not an exact user ID value. Things will get really tricky as you play around with user IDs, but I think the key takeaway is just like, remember to use the where user ID is null or is not null as you go through your queries, or else you'll get results that don't make a lot of sense. Another common pitfall I've seen and I've made myself is being mindful of the difference between the Amazon attributed events by conversion time table versus the Amazon attributed events by traffic time. The key distinction being, if I served you an impression today and I converted today, the tables would align. But if I was served an impression today and I converted 13 days from now, the traffic table would contain my conversion today, and the conversion table would put my conversion 13 days from now. So when you're thinking about building queries, it's important to be mindful of one, which table you're using. My general rule of thumb is for impressions, you want to use traffic time. For everything else, maybe except for clicks, you'd want to use the conversion time table when you're pulling those data sets. It's also important to be mindful of Amazon's 14-day attribution window in terms of how big of a range you get. So I have a little chart here from Amazon that I stole that highlights, depending on which table you're querying, when you put in the Jan 1 to Jan 15, what dates actually get added in that window. You can extend your attribution window on Amazon Marketing Cloud out to 28 days, which makes the variance between these different tables even more complex. So definitely just be mindful as you're going through your processes, think about which table am I using and ensure that you're using the right one. The thing that I've encountered most frequently as the pitfall I have stepped in myself oodles and oodles of times is thinking about aggregation thresholds. Part of AMC's underlying design is the pseudo-anonymous and aggregation thresholds within the output. So Amazon isn't revealing PII or personal identifying information. What this means in practice is there are 6 variances of how much data do you need in order to get an output. And it ranges from everything from none, where you don't need any specific number of rows to get the data to be shown, to very high, where you can never get this data point out at all in any form. And being mindful of this as you're querying can be really helpful to ensure you don't get just a really large number of null values. So if I query something that has a aggregation threshold of at least 100 user IDs, and I only have 99, I get a blank as the output. And this will cause you to have all sorts of queries where you get oodles and oodles of missing data points, and it makes it hard to figure out how this query works. There are a couple ways to address this. One is just like expanding the time frame. Generally, if you instead of looking at a specific week, if you look at a month or a quarter, you'll increase the likelihood of having enough data to meet the aggregation threshold. The second one would be thinking about broadening your filtering. What I mean by that is if you realize you are trying to aggregate or parse data at something that says, let's say, has a high aggregation threshold, maybe try something that has either remove that value or something that has a lower aggregation threshold if you're finding you can't get results that are complete. And then 2 final tricks would be looking at the dimensions in isolation. So if you're using a query that has multiple group by statements, you need to hit the aggregation thresholds by each of the groupings. And that makes your, I need 100 records exponentially harder to reach because you're dividing by more and more subsets. I would recommend doing them one at a time if you get instances where you're getting a bunch of null values. Last but not least, in the native console, there is a toggle on the top right-hand corner to append aggregation thresholds. This just tells you when you get a blank, why you got a blank. So you can back solve and say, hey, I got a blank because I didn't reach the aggregation threshold on this value. Now I can go back to my query and fix that. So definitely something to, as you're writing exploratory queries or trying to figure out what those types of analyses look like, turning on that append aggregation threshold is very useful.
A note on audience creation. Yes, so from within AMC, you can create audiences, push them to your DSP. 2 key things that we want to call out today around audiences. One is the audience pool has to exceed 2,000 for you to be able to actually get that custom audiences and have it targetable within DSP. So in essence, what that implies is the more narrow your criteria becomes, the less likely that you will actually get a sizable audience. Just keep that in mind. And so just basics, just every time you have a criterion, I mean, just run a count on the query just to see if you are going to, if it's sizable enough for you to, create one or not. So there's tons of use cases around this. I mean, one of the most common one just broadly to think about an audience creation is today you don't have a mechanism to target people who have been exposed to some of your campaigns, or let's say you want to go target people who have seen your streaming TV ad, right? There isn't a out of the box audience type within DSP, but you could create one from here from AMC and push it over. But yeah, so anyway, I think just keep these two things in mind. Again, the narrower your criteria is, the less likely you will get a real actionable audience out of it, and 2000 is that number to keep in mind. So basically, if you don't already have an instance, go get one. We're happy to help you get one if you need it. There's more events than just purchases that have been tracked, and start to leverage them. All those discrepancies, gaps, aggregation thresholds, just, we'll send out this recording after, but keep those in mind, to get through these stumbling blocks quickly. And around audience curation, just keep that size of the pool as a threshold in mind as you think about use cases. There's so much more I'm sure we'll be finding. We'll be happy to share those out, as we learn. Well, one thing I did want to call out is just the resources that are already available. Amazon's AMC certification, they made that, generally available not too long ago. Michael, go ahead and share the links in the chat. So there should be a link for AMC certification. For those of you that want to learn or improve your SQL skills, there's, again, tons of resources on the web, but at Intentwise, we have put out a self-learning little module where you don't have any setup to do, no database to install or no SQL editor to install. You can just do that in the browser. So there's a link for that too. And like I said earlier in the conversation, we are going to have a series of webinars around AMC. We hope to see you there. And then there's a number of articles we are putting out, and I think Michael is going to share the links to those that have already been published. And of course, follow Jack as well. And he's definitely in the weeds, putting out some great stuff, especially around query authoring. Certainly follow him on LinkedIn. So those are the resources that are, I think, currently available. And with that, we could get into Q&A. There's already a bunch of questions. Jack, feel free to go after some if I haven't seen them all yet, but
let's do it. All right.
Yeah.
I guess I'll just start from the top and let's go for it.
Yeah.
So first question from Muhammad is saying, with AMC reporting capabilities, can we find out the sponsored brand headline ads, product level ads, spend, and sales due to the entire customer journey feature? So what you're referring to, at least initially, is a data set that's actually already available without using Amazon Marketing Cloud. So within the Amazon Ads console, you'll see in the reporting section for sponsored brands, the sponsored brand advertised product report, which helps you identify when you have X number of products across that sponsored brand ad, which products are people actually clicking on, and you're generating ad sales from. I actually haven't played around with this in AMC, but Sri, do you have a good sense of how you would do this?
I think so I'm not sure. I don't, to be honest, I don't fully understand the question, right? So is sponsored brand ad, product level ad spend and sales. The issue with sponsored brand is that, like, you cannot actually get product level spend. Right? So because you're not targeting at a product level. So I'm not entirely certain how we would accomplish that. I mean, you get the sales data.
We can definitely follow up.
Yeah, we should follow up on this. The spend part is something that I'm not sure about, to be honest. Are you guys calculating customer lifetime value and through which method of AMC? I think the important thing to call on, maybe, Jack, we should talk about the paid subscriptions part here.
Yeah.
To get the full view of all the purchases customers are making, there is a paid subscription part of AMC where you get access to, like, the default option in AMC is you get all your advertising data. And then there's a Shopper Insights, I think is what's called, where you get access to all their sales, whether that's through advertising or not. You certainly need that full view to understand customer lifetime value. But the way I think the math is, like, in a given time horizon, how often is a customer purchasing, how much value has been extracted from a single customer, how many customers repeat versus not. There's also this subscribe and save component to it. So the math itself is straightforward. I think you just need to make sure that you're tying both the default AMC data as well as the data from Shopper Insights, which is a paid subscription.
I think so it's priced based on volume of data in your AMC instance. So you need to reach out to your Amazon ad tech contact and say, how much does this cost? It's like custom pricing. Whereas the data from the other paid data sets, so Experian and the Foursquare foot traffic data sets, have like a set known price. I've seen prices all the way from $100 to 30 grand a month for shopping insights. So check with your Amazon contact on how much it'll cost for you before you sign up. But there is a 30-day free trial that's available if you want to just play around with it.
I've also seen pricing pop up right on that tab if you go hit subscribe in some of the instances. So yeah, I think ultimately, I think it definitely is a conversation between the brand and Amazon on the pricing front. There's a question on user ID here, Jack, if you have any insight on that. Is there generally a baseline % of times that we can expect a user ID to not be available?
It's totally depends on your strategy. So if you are, for example, using a lot of offsite contextual targeting on DSP, which generally I think is actually pretty great, you will get a high volume of, like, for lack of a better word, traffic where you can't get a user ID. When you're thinking about on-site search, the percentage is pretty low. Most people, when they are on-site on Amazon, are logged in. In my experience, I've seen approximately like 1 or a little bit less than 1% of user IDs end up being null, or rows end up being null when you are looking at search. But DSP, it's all over the map. Depends on your strategy. The next question we had was, if you use search queries to collect information about user IDs, is there a way to make that actionable? Does AMC allow you to target those users via advertising or audiences? So the long and short answer is yes, you can. There was a follow-up question later on about using first-party data in audiences. That is also available. So the nice thing about AMC audiences are that you can upload any data set that's yours as long as it has a join key or a primary key into Amazon Marketing Cloud, and you can use those tables to generate audiences. So if you uploaded a data set that's, for example, hashed IDs, you can, one, do an analysis of what do my hashed IDs do and how is their behavior different from users where I don't have their first-party data, some through my CRM or a CDP or something like that. And then also parse those hashed IDs or user IDs into an audience. So select users who show up in my CRM data set and have engaged on some on-site behavior.
I was also, Jack, I was looking at the chat. So Claudia Clement, thanks for those responses. He had an interesting point on the sponsored brand metrics by product. It looks like they are using a weighted approach to allocate sales for sponsored brands to all ASINs.
I'll go to the mat on this one. So within the ads console, the report is called the attributed sales report for sponsored brands. That report is also available in the V3 version of the sponsored brands API. So most people are typically using V2. You'll need to upgrade to V3 of the Amazon Ads API to get that data set, but it does exist in the API. just most
that's
people
for-
haven't done.
Then that's for sales data, right? So
Yeah, for sales data.
Yeah, spend is still an issue, right? Because
Yeah.
there's no targeting by product. Okay, cool. The thing about there's another question here, and this has been our experience. Generally speaking, there's a question that says, hey, the day we get AMC instance access, the data access we have from then onwards is only for the past 7 days and going forward. I mean, that's what we have seen typically. Have you seen anything different, Jack? Like, let's say you request Amazon to create an instance today, that starts collecting data from like 7 days prior to that. That's typically what we've seen.
That's generally what I've seen as well. This is a change from in past where it used to be 28 days of data.
Yeah.
But I think the Amazon team has had so many AMC instance requests, they don't have enough bandwidth to put 28 days of data in there.
Yeah.
But the takeaway is, if you don't have an instance, you need to get one now, because your analysis will be delayed every day you wait.
There are questions here that are, I think we already answered. There's anything here that we haven't?
A good question from Mohammed about using AMC for day parting. This is a great one. So when you're using AMC for day parting, you will have like a 24 to 48 hour data delay, as Sreenath mentioned. When you're thinking about this for day parting, I think it's important to think about what you're trying to day part. For some of the search data sets, those are available from Amazon Stream, which I would prefer to use as a data set over AMC for hourly data. As Amazon Feed or Amazon Stream, it's had a bunch of different names, is actually like a streaming data set, which the way to think about that is like it refreshes every hour on the hour. So you can query it at a much higher rate and get much more granular up to the minute data than you can via AMC. However, that data set doesn't exist for DSP campaigns. So that is the use case I would recommend using AMC for day parting for. The way I have done it in past is you pull the last 14 or 28 days and use that as like an average by day of the week or in aggregate to say, for 3 o'clock in the morning, how does my ROAS or CVR or purchase rate compare to 5 o'clock in the afternoon? And then you adjust your bids algorithmically accordingly. That's how I would do it. It's very hard to do without a tech partner like Intentwise. Doing it by yourself and sort of winging the day parting can get you into some trouble.
Yeah, and it's funny, like there's a little bit of confusion around day parting and the need for the data to be available real time, right? Like, look, I mean, just like what you described, a lot of times you're looking at the last 30 days and trying to find a pattern and then go execute whatever day parting logic you want to execute. You're not relying on the data that showed up the last hour, right? So if that's, if that's the approach you're taking, not having data for the last 24 to 48 hours, that's okay. Right. I think day parting gets confused with action in real time and availability of data in real time. It doesn't have to be. But thank you. Yeah, that's great. Any more questions here? Feel free to chime. Input your questions in the Q&A widget if you have any.
Someone asked some good resources for learning SQL. Yeah. Intentwise has a really nice online self-service, no code, no downloads required SQL learning console. I would definitely take a look at that. As Sri mentioned, I'm an opera singer by training, and I actually learned SQL so that I could do work on Amazon Marketing Cloud. My 2 degrees in music did not teach me how to write code.
Sure, they let you be creative.
I promise you that you can learn. It's not as hard as you think to get to a level of proficiency where you can make your way through Amazon Marketing Cloud with reasonable ease.
Yeah, and also it's like I just find that, SQL is a broad base of knowledge. Honestly, learning about 10% will take you 90% of the way when it comes to using AMC. And really what you're doing a lot of times is, let's say, using an instructional query and just tweaking the syntax and experimenting. So 100%. I think I've always said, like, knowing a little bit of SQL, whether it's you or someone on your team, it's like a superpower.
If you are strapped for time, ChatGPT can also help you.
Oh, that's true. In fact, like, I'm envisioning, if ChatGPT knew the schema of AMC, and I don't know if Amazon wants ChatGPT to know or not, like, that's a different issue. But, and then, maybe there's a situation here where you type your question in just plain language and spits you back SQL.
I've thought about that a lot, and everything I've come up with violates Amazon's terms of service.
There you go.
So, not something I would recommend.
Yeah. And maybe, you know what? Amazon should do that. No? Just
They
rather
should.
than type SQL, just
should.
type sentences and it spits out SQL for you.
Yeah. They're definitely working on some things to make it a little bit easier for people who aren't SQL aficionados, but
yeah,
stay tuned. I can't leak everything.
Perfect. I think that's about it, Jack. In terms of questions, audience, thank you for joining. We will be sharing out the webinar recording, and then feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Here's mine and Jack's email if you want to go that way. If not, you can certainly find us on either social media or some of the links that Michael already shared with you.